Okay, everybody, today we're going to start on Module 2, which involves several perspectives: the trait perspective, the motive perspective, and the biological perspectives, which include both internal biological processes, genetics, as well as the theory of evolution as it applies to personality. And again, this is what Module 2 consists of. In Module 1, we talked, again, we've just basically got you introduced to how scientists study personality, defining personality. We went over just briefly the different perspectives and understanding the importance of theory in describing personality. We described the various scientific research methods that personality psychologists use, and we also talked about personality assessment that personality psychologists use. So now we are going to start on the trait perspective. And here we go. It is chapter 4 of the textbook, and let's begin. Okay, some basic themes of the trait approach. The idea being that there is some continuity in thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Basically, the characteristics that you have about yourself, which include your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, that you carry those with you over time and across different situations. This is essentially who you are. Your traits define who you are, and they do not whimsically change all that much. That the traits, your basic personality traits, really stay with you throughout your life, more or less. And another application of the trait approach is to look at individual differences. The trait approach is not as concerned about what is going on within an individual in terms of what is making that particular trait. There is some interest in that, but the greater interest is being able to differentiate people based on a particular trait. So in other words, you can have a trait like extroversion, which is kind of like being outgoing, and you can differentiate one group of people from another group of people, or one person from another person, and you can basically quantify how much of that particular trait a particular person has, and how much of comparing one group with another. And this is a useful application of the trait approach. If we focus only on what was going on inside of an individual, then how are you going to compare that to another group of individuals? You really can't, because for each person it would be entirely unique. Oftentimes you'll see personality described in terms of either types or traits. You've probably even heard of what a type A personality is, or a type B personality. And certainly Freud had his ideas about different types of personality based on psychosexual development, but we'll get to that later. But basically, what types are is essentially putting somebody into a category. So say someone who would be an introvert or an extrovert. You're not saying how introverted somebody is. You're not saying how extroverted somebody is. You're saying, this person is introvert and this person is extrovert. Interestingly enough, when we'll talk later about Carl Jung, one of the ways in which he conceptualized personality was looking at people who are introverts as people who are kind of looking inward introspecting on themselves, while extroverts were more focused on the outside world. So it's kind of an interesting definition of introvert and extrovert. But again, we'll talk more about that when we get into Carl Jung. But basically, again, the type is these qualitative categories. Meanwhile, traits are dimensions. In other words, where you can say how introverted or how extroverted somebody is, and you can compare. Joe is more extroverted than Jane, let's say, and so you can quantify how extroverted or introverted somebody is. So thus, types are qualitative, traits are quantitative. Qualitative meaning it represents a particular quality of person, while quantitative means it is indicating how much of that particular characteristic exists, and you can compare. One person can have more than another. It reflects quantity, how much of something. Another way that types are used is kind of an easy, generic label. A lot of people find that comforting to be able to say, okay, this person's a type A. I know I'm not going to deal with this person. He's a type A personality. He's going to give me a lot of trouble. So it's a convenience to be able to put someone into that category. Unfortunately, when you put someone in that category, you're leaving a lot of error behind, because nobody fits into a perfect category. It's just a matter of convenience to label the person as such. Another problem, of course, is that once you get that label, maybe you can be discriminated against because of having that particular label. But again, identifying types is something that really, in many ways, we all do, not just for personality, but we put things into categories all the time. That's how we organize the world around us. So there's nothing new about that. And again, when we're talking about types, oftentimes we look at that as it could be biologically or genetically based, and the research on traits, looking at it how people differ on these particular traits. Okay, two approaches to the study of personality from the trait perspective. And kind of touches on what we were talking about before about, individual differences versus, intrapersonal, processes going on within a person. The nomothetic perspective, again, sees the traits like extroversion, introversion, and so on as universal traits, universal characteristics. If you go from one corner of the earth to another corner of the earth, people are going to have these particular traits. Some of them are going to have higher levels of it, some are going to have lower levels of it. But because this is universal, that means that you can compare people from all over the world. You can compare one person to another. You can compare one group of people to another group of people. You can compare Americans to Japanese to essentially look at extroversion or introversion or sociability or aggression or whatever it happens to be, whatever trait you happen to be looking for. The nomothetic approach is saying you can definitely do this in that you can compare groups of individuals on these particular traits. Well, if all of these traits are universal, does that mean that we as human beings are all alike? Of course, the answer is no, we are not all alike. We are all different. But our differences lie not in the fact that, my trait is different from your trait, but the fact that my combination of traits is different from your combination of traits. I may have higher scores on extroversion than you do, but then again, maybe You have higher scores on conscientiousness than I do. Conscientiousness is kind of like being responsible. But anyway, these are just a couple of examples. So in other words, your unique combination of traits, not necessarily the traits themselves, the traits are universal, but your combination, your unique combination, levels of different traits, that represents what makes you a unique person. Okay? But on the traits, you can definitely compare one group with another. On the other hand, the idiographic approach really focuses on the individual, not on comparing individuals. For one thing, they would argue that traits are not universal, that that traits are essentially attached to the person, and your meaning of a particular trait is particularly unique. What that would mean is, let's say I would have asked you a question. How extroverted are you on a scale of 1 to 10? And you circle the number 7. And then I ask the question of myself, and I also circle the number 7. Does that mean we have the same exact level of extroversion? Well, maybe. Or else it could mean my definition of extroversion may be quite different from your definition of extroversion. Extroversion as what it means to me versus as what it means to you. And if that's the case, if my definition of extroversion is quite different from your definition of extroversion, then we're talking about apples and oranges. We're talking about two separate, unique traits that you really can't compare on. So we can't really say we have the same score on the same trait. We may have the same score on two different traits. That would be an idiographic understanding of traits. The idea being that the traits are attached to the person, and that each person has his or her own unique definition of it.